in today's presentation, so what we will do, so it's almost 1.5 years since the last ALC, and certainly a lot of improvements were done in ALX. So, and we are going to present you what we just did within that period, and we just selected some features, ALX features, to demo you, and at the end we'll just tell you what we are going to do with anyLogistix 3. So, as I already said, the last anyLogistix conference was in 2016, and it's almost 1.5 years since that. So within that period, we did 4 releases, 4 major releases. We don't count here the minor releases, which were also just bring quite a bit of improvements to ALX. And that's year, we're also going to release anyLogistix Studio. I'll talk about that edition on the next slide, and also ALX 3.0. So, when we presented anyLogistix at the last AnyLogic conference, we had just 1 edition, professional. So, last summer, we released a personal learning edition, which is designed for self-education or for teaching. So, yes, it has some limitations, which doesn't allow to use it for the commercial projects, but that edition perfectly fit the need for teaching and self-education. So, as the Studio edition, this one is designed to help and simplify your development extensions for anyLogistix. We'll show you some functionality in that presentation. Some new UI features we implemented within this period. So, first, we added filters on the map. So, now you may choose which objects you would like to see on the map. So, we added validation. That's the checking the scenario data for consistency. If there is any inconsistency in the data, you will get a notification, as well as if ALX thinks that something wrong with the input parameters, you will also get a warning about that. Also, we added a supply chain structure view. So now you may look at both a geographical structure of your supply chain as well as at the logical structure of your supply chain. And with that April release, which will be published within a few days, we also added Get Support button. So you may just contact our support directly from the development environment, or from the modeling environment. So add the model scenarios you have a question about. So, Anatoly, could you please demo that?
I will start with validation. So, when you run your experiment or just press this button near the data, you can check your scenario, and if there are some inconsistencies, just let me, for example, I will change that field from supplier, which is actually a factory, to all suppliers group, which relates to objects of supplier type. So if I press that button, I get an error that we actually do not have any suppliers in our model, so that rule will not work. And after I change it back, now it goes. So filters on the map. There is a special button that lets you to select individual objects or groups. So you can choose which sites you want to see, which customers you want to see. And if you selected just one or several distribution centers, then it will show only connections of that object like this. So you see, not all customers, but only customers connected to this site. Get support. So now you can select which scenarios you want to send to our support team right in the product. So you just select one or number of scenarios, and they are automatically attached to a message as well as the log file. So you don't have to search for it on your hard drive. Okay.
Yeah. Other features we added, say, if you are talking about analytical optimization, what we did, so now we have a transportation optimization. So at the moment we have two algorithms. This is vehicle routing problem and so-called capacitated vehicle routing problem. We added GFA, greenfield analysis by roads. So, and most of the improvements were done in network optimization part. I will remind you that at the last LC, we presented like a Ciplex that at that point, we just built in Ciplex into anyLogistix. So now we also added custom and indicator constraints, special functions, for example, step functions, CO2 emissions. So basically it means that now with anyLogistix, you may define any kind of linear problem and any kind of linear constraints. So also the great feature we added in this April release, this is feasibility check. So when you run your optimization and if ALX cannot find a solution, it will suggest you what to change in your scenario in order ALX would be able to find a solution for that scenario. So yeah, Anatoly, could you please demo that?
So I will start with greenfield analysis. It is also called gravitational analysis as well. And the idea is that we consider as original greenfield analysis works, it considers paths as the crow flies. So straight paths on Earth's surface. And it doesn't know anything about surface. So classical greenfield analysis may end up in proposing you to build a site, for example, in the middle of the lake, which is actually correct from mathematical point of view. It's the best option, but in real life, it's not affordable. So we introduced greenfield analysis with roads, which considers real roads. It considers also cities of certain population, which can be used to place warehouses. And in this case, we get this picture. So it considers distances by roads and selects number of cities to check where to place a warehouse and selects the best option. Feasibility check. It often happens that you build a model, it has lots of constraints, and when you finally finish it, you have the whole problem definition. you try to optimize it, and you get a message that scenario is infeasible, and you have no idea which constraint or set of constraints, maybe 2, maybe 2,000 constraints, together lead to that infeasibility. So we implemented feasibility check, and let me check. So yeah, we have a factory with production limited by throughput. So maximum throughput is 2 million. And if I run this experiment, validation goes okay, but then it says scenario is infeasible. And if we want to perform feasibility check, just press yes, and we get number of suggestions what to do. And we can either decrease demand in several points in several demand points, or we can increase throughput by proposed number. So it's 340,000 with something. So I will add here like 500,000 more, and I will run it again. And here it is. Another option is to just use like soft constraints. So to rather than changing the constraints, we can also use penalties. So I will show you how to do that. I will go back to production policy. I will change it back to initial value. So scenario becomes infeasible again. But then I will say that there is a penalty for violating this throughput. And if I run experiment again, now it's feasible, but we get some penalties. Probably you cannot see it because it's small there, but we get penalties for violating this constraint. So it's a soft constraint. And I will talk a little bit about transportation optimization a little bit later.
So another great feature we just implemented in ALX. So in ALX now you have 4 types of scenarios. This is greenfield analysis, this is network optimization, transportation optimization, and dynamic simulation. The problem is that if you do the analysis with one of the approach and then you want to switch to another one, you actually have to populate all the data from the scratch. That's really created a significant usage barrier to use different kind of approaches when you do the analysis. And with ALX, we solve that problem with this interconversion feature, which basically allows you to convert the scenario to any another type of scenario and then back if you want to. So that's way you may easily start with a dynamic simulation, let's say having the network optimization results, or just export your routes which were found during the transportation optimization to your dynamic simulation model. So all that now possible with ALX, and it does not take much time and efforts to switch from one scenario to another.
So yeah, let's get again to scenario. So here is the network optimization problem. So I will run it, get a result, and then here it is, by the way. So it selected the best possible option of supplying these customers through 3 DCs. And then I will convert it to simulation scenario. Just one click. And now we have simulation scenario with inventory policies, sourcing policies, and so on, additional information. And now we can perform analysis of supply chain in dynamic simulation model. Okay, so now we have the same scenario converted to simulation. And we see that all shipments are going straight to each customer. So now I'm going to show you transportation optimization. So I will convert that scenario to transportation optimization type. Here it is. And I will perform an experiment. So I will select the vehicle type we will use. I will remove any limits on travel segments here, although you can use though. And I will run it. So that warning says that some parameters of cost calculation will not be taken into account. And finally, we get routes through several customers. And what we actually can do next, we can export that to original scenario, simulation scenario. And now if I run it again, we will see that these so-called milk runs are used in simulation scenario. So now trucks are going from one customer to another, shipping their goods and then return back.
Yeah, next slide. So, yeah, again, since the most of you already saw that slide and demo, so I'll just briefly go through this slide for those who did not participate in yesterday's workshop. So that's another feature which we call cache to serve. Basically, this is about finding the cache dynamics. So we have a supply chain, we have our supply chain, we have a cache account, and from that cache account, you have to pay all the operational supply chain costs. Then we have customers and payment terms with those customers. So which forms actually account receivables. And once we get paid, those cash goes directly to our cash account. We also use this cash account to pay our suppliers, which also have payment terms. In the case we don't have money, we just borrow them in the bank, and then we have to pay back the loan plus interest. So this way, we may just find out the, sorry, it's not civil, there is actually a chart here with the cache dynamics. So you may just look at the cache dynamics, which is actually very, I think, informative thing for those who manage the supply chain and production. And there is no other way to find it out except dynamic simulation. So the next approach we use, this is a safety stock. Again, we use dynamic simulation to calculate a safety stock. It works in the following way. So we have a reordering point here. So we have the quantity until which we place the order. Then we introduce in our dynamic simulation system redundant stock, which we know in advance is much more than we actually need. I mean, much more than the actual safety stock. If we have an ideal inventory dynamics, it will look like that. And once we introduce variability, it may look, for example, like that. And at the end of simulation run, we just measure how much of our redundant safety stock were used during that simulation experiment, and based on that value, we will recommend the safety stock to use in your system. So, risk analysis. That's another experiment we just added in this release, in April release. So let's assume we have a supply chain here. So something may happen there. The supplier may just get out of order. Some routes may not working by some reason. There can be a strike on the DC. So also we have a demand variability. We have a lead time variability too. And when we run dynamic simulation experiment, we measure so-called performance impact, how this risk actually affects the supply chain performance. It can be like a service level, revenue, lead time, whatever else. And also we measure so-called time to recover, basically how much time it will take to recover from the disruption. And then we use that data to analyze the risk we have in our supply chain system. It can be operational risk like bullwhip effect, for example, or it can be disruption risk like ripple effect. So, yeah, please demo.
So I will start with cache to serve example. It's regular simulation experiment with additional...
I'm not sorry, I think we can just miss it because the most people already saw it, yeah.
And
as well as safety stock.
What about safety stock?
Yeah,
I think
yeah, you may just show the results, yeah.
Yeah, so safety stock, when we perform that experiment, we select number of replications we want and desired service level percentage. And as a result, we get statistics on the level of safety stock needed on each replication to serve specified service level. So we can see statistics by each site or distribution center and understand the variability of that safety stock. And at the end, we can convert that result to simulation scenario. So it will be the original one, but with modified inventory policies, which will also take into account safety stock. So risk analysis, Timothy just described that it's additional experiment which also replicates several runs, and we can also specify additional parameters. Service level, when we think our supply chain or our system fails because of some events, disruptions, and recovery service level when we think it recovered. So it helps us to calculate that time to recovery window in each case. And let me run it. So besides that, we have lots of different categories to measure risks. So we can measure it by revenue or by service level or any other statistics that we have in our system. So it will take some time to run these 10 replications.
Yeah, another feature we are going to demo you today. Actually, we did, I think, actually great work. simplifying the development of ALX extensions. So what we did, so first we added what we call extensions manager. So you may open that directly from anyLogistix. You may switch on, switch off extensions, as well as add them and delete. Then another thing we have, this is a templates, or extension templates here. So what is that? So these are the templates developed in anyLogic, and when you just want to create an extension, you select that menu item, like create new one. Then ALX suggests you to select the templates you would like to extend. It may be factory, it may be distribution center, it may be sourcing policy, inventory policy, transportation cost calculator, and so on and so on. Then you open that in a development environment, in anyLogic development environment, which closely now integrated with ALX, and modify it in the way you want to. And then you just directly from anyLogic, you just plug it back in anyLogistix. And this is what Anatoly will demonstrate you next.
So here we can understand which events happened in our system. For example, like increase of demand or flooding of river or something else. These are actually defined with some probabilities in original scenario. And we can also understand how long did it take to recover and whether system recovered at all after this disruption. And for any measure, we can see like best, worst, and mean case of any characteristic, as well as the whole breakdown by replications.
Yeah, so basically to say that the list of these performance impact characteristics, and once you select it, you will see the dynamics of that characteristic, histogram, and best, mean, worst chart. So let's then demo extensions.
Yeah, so I will, let me check with it. I'll close anyLogic. So I select create new extension, and I want to extend a customer. So after pressing a button, anyLogistix run anyLogic and creates a template there. So you cannot see it on the
unfortunately,
screen.
you cannot see the splash screen because it's another screen. Yeah.
So it creates a new copy of a template, which is standard behavior of anyLogistix object. So here it is. So you can change the processes there. You can rebuild them completely from scratch, depending on your needs. And well, probably it makes some sense for customers, but it could also be like your own production processes, your own factory with all the limitations, resources, and so on. And then let me change something here. So I will add an icon here. And I will export this extension. I'm sorry, wrong bottom. So yeah, I will export that extension, and after I do that, I can switch back to I can switch back to anyLogistix, and we see a notification that a new extension was added to anyLogistix. So we can press OK and deal with that, or go to Extensions Manager, so it shows us the new one. And we can manage other extensions as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change all the customers in this example to a new template. And I will run simulation. So actually, I didn't change any behavior, so it will be definitely OK for this scenario. But if I click on a customer, we see that icon that I just added. So immediately, we get all our changes in our supply chain. So another example.
I think it's time for Q&A and concluding remarks.
OK?
Yeah, let's. I would like to show that one actually, and then we will do the remarks. OK? So
yeah, the idea of this scenario is that we changed behavior of both suppliers and of both customers and our distribution centers. So each distribution center actually has a rating which is changed online by customers based on whether their order was delivered in time or not. And again, with some probability, customers can refuse to accept an order that came late. So it goes back to a warehouse. And depending on the rating, customers decide whether they want to order or not. So it's kind of self-balancing system, and it is much closer to our new reality when everybody checks the rating of a certain company before starting to work with it.
yeah, you might just, could you please increase the speed and show the available inventory dynamics? So yeah, basically that model just show you how that new purchasing behavior, customer purchasing behavior, influence the supply chain system. Because once your customer may, let's say, reject or refuse from the goods you send them, you will have completely different inventory dynamics. Finally, you will have a bullwhip effect in your system. For example, you will have much more inventory than you should, so you do not know how to manage actually this inventory, which, well, you sell it, but customer do not yet get it, so should you just deduct it from your inventory or not? So how to plan the inventory for the future. So all those things, again, can be captured with anyLogistix, for example, in that case, with customization of customer object. Okay, let's back to the slides. We have the last slide. So, about anyLogistix 3. So we have pretty ambitious plan about anyLogistix 3. First, we are going to move our user interface to the browser. So it will result that pretty many things we'll have to do with visualization, dashboard, reports, and statistics. So then we plan to add some features to network optimization part that's mostly batches. We'll add transportation optimization with time windows when you will be able to define the time slots within which the goods should be delivered to the point. So in simulation part, we'll do a support for external business intelligence tools, as well as we'll add a shared fleet and operating hours and time windows to be consistent with the network optimization part. Then we'll migrate our default database to SQL Express and Postgres for better support for large scenarios and models. The last thing we are going to do, we are going to release Mac OS version. All this we are going to do by December this year. Yeah, thank you very much. You may find more information on our website. We have ALX textbook, we have case studies. You may download personal learning edition to try the product. What we may promise you, that those who follow anyLogistix, they know we are adding new features with a good pace, and we promise you to keep the same pace in the future. Yeah, I was glad, we were glad to see all of you at that conference, and hope to see you next time, next year. Thank you very much.
I think you made a comment saying that the network optimization can now add any custom constraints.
Correct.
How do you realize it? I mean, I wonder whether you can just indicate how do you do that?
Yeah, Anatoly, do you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, we actually provide you an ability to specify kind of label for each variable or constraint that is generated automatically from input data. And you can define your own constraints using these labels as like variable names. So you can define a constraint, for example, supplier throughput less than or equal to 1 million units. Or you can build a correspondence between two flows, for example, that you have to send the same amount of goods by this direction and that direction, or that transportation company and this transportation company, and so on. So you just build new constraints, new equations and inequations in input data, and then they're taken into account by optimizer.
More questions?
Okay. Is it possible to obtain any real data, for example, real emissions in the model of transportation, or distance of the real roads?
Yeah, so as you saw, our distances are from GIS systems, so they're real distances by roads. We also have internal database of population all over the world in each city. But, if we talk about like transportation costs and CO2 emissions, they're not yet there, but we're working on that.
You've just demoed how this anyLogistix can be used in the make-to-availability or make-to-stock environment, where we maintain the inventory of the stuff and then ship our customers from the inventory. And how can it be applied into the make-to-order environment, where we have some time buffer to serve our customers, and customers is placing order on us, and we're not willing to maintain the inventory?
We're not willing to what?
To maintain inventories.
Well, I think there could be several approaches to that, but in any case, you can take into account lead times in your system. So one of the standard policies is the fastest source, or you can develop your own sourcing policies that will choose proper sourcing based on characteristics of order. So if it can wait, you can order from warehouse that is at a longer distance. If you have to ship in a short frame, then you select different source or different transportation mode, for example, airplane instead of truck.
Thank you. I had a similar question. It was about hybrid. So a customer's ordering online, and I either can see whether it's in stock, so it will be supplied from stock, or they want it to be assembled to order, or completely made to order, or even engineered to order. So I think that's a question to keep in mind. My curiosity was about modeling the manufacturing units. To what extent can you model campaign runs and dependent setups within the manufacturing unit? Because that's another factor that can cause massive amount of variability, is how long those campaign runs are. And I want to be able to run multiple scenarios to see how the campaign lengths impact my availability and responsiveness downstream.
Right, we have like variation experiment, so that you can run number of replications with variation of different parameters and get aggregated statistics on these runs. And you can do that with your production model integrated into your supply chain. So you can build an extension with your real processes on a factory and then plug it to anyLogistix and run number of replications to check what variability you have.
More questions?
Yeah, do you consider urban traffic when finding the distribution center, the traffic in the urban areas?
We don't currently. So we consider only distances because, well, you know, traffic is, it really depends on time of the day, right? So it's hard to make this results trustable, right?
Yeah, you may actually add your custom transportation calculator. So if you want to, and in this calculator, you'll just put some coefficient or whatever, which would represent this delay because of traffic.
I had a similar question. Is there any APIs to connect external transit databases? So if I have some TomTom database or some other database which gives the distance time, I can just use those instead?
Yeah, so in next minor release planned this summer, we're going to release an ability to extend route provider. So it will could connect to external data or external provider, like, I don't know, Google or other routes providers. You just need an API key for that. And then, yeah, it will be possible.
Okay, thank you.